Where is my rejected soul? Where lies my mortal part? Where is my fleeting poor existence? Where are my loved ones and my dreams? Weary and exhausted, I had just emerged from composing a dark novel with these words taken as I cannot tell precisely to describe these are the exact words, but I have always felt the first ones that came up were the right ones. I had lost my body and had grown unable to carry my head any longer. I existed neither in this world nor in another. I had grown estranged to reality. Existentialist nausea was an amusement park ride compared to what I had been through. I felt hopeless, forlorn, misunderstood, tired, useless, and derelict. I had lost pretty much everything I believed in. I was the desperate, dejected captain of an icebreaker stuck in one of the poles. What can one possibly turn into when writing a novel full of borrowings from theology called The Nihilist? What does he feel in the embrace of that gut-wrenching feeling of nihilism for years? But it was over now. Worn out and lonely, I finally managed to go out. I gave in to the wretched, sordid pastime of nights of decadence, hoping it would make me forget the bleeding of my soul. Utterly unbelievable, but fate's dramatic mechanism had started up and washed me ashore. I still cannot fully comprehend what happened, but what I know is that I had stepped into the most ironical story a nihilist could enter: hopeless love. Like I said, I still have not understood to this day what exactly happened, and I do not intend to recount it with flashbacks or other sophisticated narration techniques. I could do that, but this is my story, and just like a surgeon cannot operate on his own heart, I do not know where to start. The lyrics of that famous song, "Where Do I Begin?" must have been written in a similar state of mind. I can see that only now. I collected all the stale bread in the house into bags again. I recently picked up the habit of going down to the Swadia seaside at midnight in the dark, after that strange night which turned my life around. My hands full with bags of stale bread, I marched into the dark night. Once again, I would set up a feast for seagulls under the starless winter sky. I would confide in them among their violent shrieks. Like the head of a family about to say grace, I would stand up to recite lines from Novalis, Schiller, Pushkin, Lamartine, and Byron into the dark waters. From the most excruciating age of the Romantics, from my age. The birds would not understand what I would exclaim, but that would only make me smile more wryly, in the desert darkness, since nobody understands me anyways. The distant blurry lights of the Prince's Islands, the minacious darkness of the starless night sky above, the wild screams of the seagulls competing for the snippets of bread, and the waves crashing on the shore with the southwestern wind. I feel melancholic. I feel forlorn, always, and hurt from not belonging in this age. Not to mention that I was on exile for the past 15 months. I had met that foreign lady 15 months ago on a dark winter night similar to this one, on a surreal terrace in Cihangir. She was watching the historic peninsula from behind misty windows caused by the cold winter night. Between wiping that mist with her hand and rejoicing in a childish happiness at the view, she would join us from time to time to share her feelings. She would want us to feel happy as well, and would, in the end, be puzzled by our subdued feelings and sour expressions. She was born into the night like a shining star, but calling her a sun would do her better justice. Frankly, her blonde hair and her blue eyes seemed like a godly gift sacrificed to the night, and her manners were unlike anything we had been used to seeing in women here: candid, modest, gracious, and amiable. Some curse their bad luck. At times, it is best to accept it as fate. I had said, fate is where the jinn inside us drives us to, in the novel I mentioned above. My jinn drove me to tragedy even on a night like this. I had overheard that this foreign woman, who had appeared like an anachronic luminous planet, was in fact a teacher of literature at the university. Next came the line of unfortunate events that brought absolute tragedy. In incomprehensible stupidity, impetuousness, and drunk clumsiness, I tried to show myself off to this exquisite woman with whom I shared the same ideals, and whom I was sure to never meet a match for. I clumsily dove into a discussion of philosophy, art, and literature, trying to get by with my inadequate command of English. You can guess the rest. I have no interest in going through what happened and in living through that pain again. But of course, you can assume that I skimmed through all the deadly sins, pride being the first. In the end, she despised me and left. To be honest, I despised myself too. But I had nowhere to go, for wherever I went, I had to carry myself along. This is tragic, but inevitable. I can hardly remember how I got up from where I had sunk like a bag of sand and brought myself to the handrails of the terrace. Flickering in my eyes at each step I took was the faint appearance of Diablo, encouraging me to jump. Knowing that I could not, he made me watch the scene from a moment ago on replay. If only God were real. I really needed him then. Months fell off the calendar, but I never got over that night. What was more frightening was that the more I tried to forget her, the more she busied my mind. And what was even more frightening was that months later she had begun to appear at places I frequented. That was truly painful. I wanted to run to her, embrace her, and unbosom my heart, saying that I was not that kind of a person and that I was sorry. But this was out of the question. As a matter of fact, she was avoiding me too. Maybe I had portrayed such a humdrum character that she genuinely did not remember me. Both possibilities were enough to drive me out of my mind, and so I drank, and drank, until the sun was up and even the homeless had retreated to park benches and covered themselves with newspapers. My tragedy pursued. She was of such good nature that she instantly became the whole neighborhood's sweetheart. She got on close terms with all of my friends, but I was left out. I was like a kid not allowed in a toy store where everyone inside was intoxicated with joy. They would get together, laugh, have fun, and pass the days merrily, while I, who was desperately crazy about her, was excluded. I was smitten by every one of her aspects. Her gloomy smile that unveiled griefs from her past, her radiant eyes unique only to people with golden hearts, her gaze that depicted 1,000 profound meanings, her rich facial expressions, which are of the kind that appear only in higher literary figures, her warmth and candor, her choice of the street life with us, in spite of her splendid literary career, her concerns and her friendship. Above all, her sophistication that reflected an unprecedented affluence. I was in awe of everything about her, but I was not allowed to come any close to her. Perhaps this was not the case, and all I needed to do was pluck up my courage and explain myself to her. Maybe then she would forgive me. But how could I possibly find that strength amongst all that emotional frailty? In spite of all my despair, I would often travel from one continent to the other to see her in Cihangir with her sweet expression, her smile reminiscent of a gloomy joy, and her soul-soothing gestures. I would even delight in seeing her from afar, but would also shatter to pieces when unfamiliar men appeared beside her. Like a secret fan, I also used to send her little gifts, which I thought out during the week through people I did not know. After she was gone, I would head back home at dawn, weary and befuddled. Oh, the things that happened to me each time on my way back home in that state. But I would never mind any of that and get into senseless fights with hobos over small amounts of money, taking the risk of being stabbed because in fact I did want to be stabbed. What else could put this fool out of his misery? On another night, where I had grown exhausted and defeated from watching her across the room, I decided to give in to the call of the sea and took the stairs down to Kabataş. There was no transportation there to take me back home, but I wanted to go anyways. Right in front of an historic arched door, which was battered and covered with graffiti, were these two young bohemian girls sitting on the stairs under a streetlight, sharing a bottle of wine and smoking. They looked like the artsy type with their grunge style. They could not be more than 20, and sitting here at this hour all by themselves was an act of audacity all by itself. I appreciated their courageous effort. My intention was to tiptoe past them like a cat without drawing any attention to my existence, but one of them shouted out to me on the way, "Hey, Pops!" I stopped to turn to the two girls illuminated under the streetlight. They were very young and were desperately trying to live on the side of danger. What they were doing was enough to draw every kind of trouble to them, but I was determined to acknowledge their bravery. She spoke on as soon as I halted. "Could you buy us a bottle?" "You have to go home," I said. "You are in for trouble." "Are you going to buy us that bottle or what?" "I couldn't, even if I wanted. All stores are closed at this hour." "Where there's a will, there's a way," said the other. "Yeah, why can't you just say you don't want to?" Actually, they were right. Of course I did not want to buy them any alcohol. I was not going to bring alcohol to two eccentric young girls at this hour on this deserted street that was trouble written all over it. However, I was civilized enough to respect their choices. Before I could say anything, one of them spoke. "You have been drinking up until this hour yourself. You must have problems of your own." "That is none of your business," I shot back. "Why not?" blurted out the other. "Kids, are you out of your minds? Do you say these to whoever comes up to you on the street? How many people can you find here who have been drinking this late and meandering down the street?" "How does that matter?" I asked. "You look troubled, so you must drink with us too." "I don't need you to tell me when to drink." "We're waiting," the other said cheekily. I turned back and began to walk. One of the girls leaped to stand up and put a strange object on her nose. I did not care, but I think they were practicing for a play of sorts. Or maybe it was only for horsing around. "Dumb kids," I muttered to myself and shuffled my feet away. My steps took me away from them, but a strange curiosity grew inside me. What were they playing? What did that girl stick to her nose? What if somebody hurt them? They were right, actually. I did want to drink, etc., etc. Contrary to all my protests, my feet dragged me to a liquor store. I returned to the duo with 2 bottles of cheap wine in my hand. I was surprised to find myself there too. When I returned, they were kissing in a peculiar way. It did not look erotic, but seemed more like theatrical. One of the girls was even wearing a cloak like a knight. They were not surprised to see me, they just went on playing. I just stood there with 2 open bottles of wine in my hand. Then one of them pushed the other. I noticed she still wore that object on her nose. She took one of the bottles from my hand. They looked like they knew all along that I would come back. The girl took a huge gulp from the bottle and proceeded to read a tirade. I knew it. It was from Cyrano de Bergerac. "Are you girls studying?" I asked. "Is this for a play?" They glanced at me sourly. "Are you students? Is this some kind of homework? I know it's from Cyrano." "Yes, it is our homework. Not from school though, but from life." "How do you mean? I don't get it. Are you trying to be a smartass?" "No, pups." "Then what is it?" "I'm a poet, pups. I study French literature, and this fool here has a crush on a French kid. I'm trying to help her divulge how much she's in love and what kind of a person she is, as her French is only enough to help her with waiters and hobos." "Kind of like Cyrano," the other added. "Everybody needs a Cyrano in this age," said the first one. "Because everybody is everywhere nowadays. It is much harder today to express such profound feelings to a stranger than it was in the time when Cyrano did it for a dumb knight. How can you earn anyone's love if you can't express yourself?" I did not say anything. I only tilted the bottle and drank a quarter of it in a single go. The 2 were amazed. Suddenly, I was awake and knew what to do. Yes, this was it. This was what I had to do. During the chaotic amalgamation of the world through globalization, many shabby writers had engaged in getting themselves published abroad like grand writers, and in doing so had gotten themselves translated through many kinds of vulgarness and immodesty. I always viewed that enterprise as an abomination. I never got myself involved and always waited for others if they decided to translate my material. But now I wanted the same. Not to show off, not to be famous, not to get myself published elsewhere, not to make myself heard in the international arena, but just to pour my soul out to a queen with an angelic heart which I had broken. I needed a Cyrano myself. "Girls," I said with delight, "make a wish." "Nothing, thank you," the 2 replied simultaneously. "No, please, ask for anything. This is very important for me, because you saved my life." "All right, say it then. one of them spoke. Say what? Her name. I hesitated. A smile buoyed up to my face. In that moment, I knew my eyes had grown brighter too. I pictured her sweet, gloomy, profound, and elevated gaze in front of me. I spilled a tear. W. That's romantic. Good luck, said one of them. V for W, joked the other. Forever young, pups, said the one wearing the cloak, and blinked a single eye at me. To you too, I said, and walked away like Gene Kelly in Singing in the Rain. Only the rain was missing to finish the tableau. The tears of joy in my eyes compensated for that. I had found the antidote. All I needed was to find my Cyrano. After that mirthful night, upon some thinking, I brought my feet back on the ground. This idea that I had discovered was fantastic, but childish, for I knew what literature was, and moreover, believed that it was untranslatable. Who knows what my lofty feelings would turn into in the hands of a chosen Cyrano? Who knows what would happen to my accentuations? Who knows how many of my melodious articulations would be lost? Maybe it would turn into a huge jumble of arid strings of words and blunders. This was only one aspect of it. What was actually degrading about it was that, of all the people in the world, I, who had devoted his life to literature, who had shoved away all worldly blessings with the back of his hand, who had ripped this country's most prestigious diploma without even looking back, who had refused to be part of this loathsome system, and after 30 years of pain and desperation, after publishing 30 books, after appearing in countless fake love letters to many young lovers, after having united many broken hearts with their lovers through my belles lettres, now I was searching for a Cyrano to express my feelings to a creature who captivated me. What a tragedy. Knighthood actually belongs to Cyrano, while contempt is upon the one helped. But now I was ready to play that contemptible reptile to phrase my feelings for her. I bemoaned my fate. Why had I not ever put any effort to improve my English? Why had I settled for lazy everyday conversations and hollow chats in front of the TV? Now I was paying for all of that. The price was the need to find a Cyrano. Later on, I thought it over once more. No, I had done everything to learn English, and even French and German, but in the end, my life had turned out to be just a cemetery of half-learned languages. I had once come across a hint of evidence as to why this was the case, and that had deepened my negligence. An idea that belonged to William S. Burroughs. This great American author had stated that only the foolish and the shallow could easily learn another language, and that he never could. I totally sympathized with that. It made perfect sense. I could never reach the spiritual depth I fathomed in my own mother tongue in another language, and thus I always felt simple-minded and worthless. It made me sick to my stomach. I always lost any urge to speak. That is how I let it go. But the foolish never do that, do they? They gab on and on like there was no tomorrow with a vocabulary of about 300 words. In the end, what was I to do? I was back to black days. I had begun to watch my acquaintances very carefully, judging if their English would be sufficient to reflect my feelings thoroughly. I was asking all kinds of questions and rousing suspicion from my favorite young friends. I even had younger members of my family who had studied in American schools translate samples for me, and I sent those texts to people doing their master's degree in the States. Ultimately, it all counted for naught. Even if I had persuaded myself to dwell in this shit, I could not find my Cyrano. Back to Jahangir again. I was watching the matchless woman from a distance and crying on the inside. I had also undertaken writing my woebegone feelings in my own language. I was penning sad ballads for her, and reading them back to myself and dreaming the days away. My melancholy slowly shifted to depression. I never could gather my strength, and so I began to fall sick frequently. Not able to get up from bed, I would seek comfort in painless death, sleep. I would sleep forever, and in my dreams I was always talking to her. At times, I was falling into hysterics over expressing myself to her, and at other times I was floating on cloud number 9 because I had just seen her exquisite smile. I even saw myself as the hero in a tale, giving up my life for her. Unfortunately, I woke up sweating upon a nightmare of despair at the end of each one. My life had tilted to a halt. I found myself incapable of replying to my editor on the phone, to directors from the literary world, and executives from organizations who were to put on my plays. When it rang, the telephone would turn into a stone weighing a ton. Most of the time, I would not bother raising the receiver. My strange condition had begun to cause concern among the youngsters of my family. They were unjaded and still belonged to an age of those who believed in love. I always belonged in that archaic age in which none of my contemporaries stayed for long. I sensed it. They were pulling things behind my back. They would show up at my house for no apparent reason and not leave for long. They would sometimes stay over and rummage around in the dark like cats and whisper. I would find some of them sitting upon my bed in consultation like a group of med students when I woke up from one of my occasional nightmares. The samples I was handing out for translation were allegedly new pieces for a novel I was working on. Apparently, none of them had bought it. Eventually, they understood the state I was in. Now the people belonging to the age of love were mobilized. It later came to my knowledge that my tragic condition had become an issue in their friendly gatherings as well. Not only them, but their friends, whom I had known since they were little kids, had grown up to be young men and women of virtue. They were not soiled by life yet. Most of them were my fans, just as fanatical as I was about them. We had gotten together for many nights to read poems and build fires by the seaside. We had written stories and essays to magazines, tackled translations, and gone to rock concerts together. And they had embarked upon this adventure with the trigger of one of those wonderful young men, Emre. Like the benevolent Lilliputians, these collective Cyranos of the age of love had entered my home while I was away one day and taken copies of my latest writings. They had engrossed themselves in an arduous effort to translate my work. Furthermore, they had had their friends abroad proofread them too. One morning, as I was looking for excuses not to go out of bed as usual, I found these translations left on the edge of my bed by these youths who came out of the blue. I discerned what the hell they were up to when I arrived at the breakfast table with them. I felt like Gulliver when he had just escaped from drowning in the waves and woken up in Lilliputia all tied up, unable to move, think, analyze, and understand anything at all. I spent the following days reading and chewing on the Cyrano Collective's translations. I could not understand them completely, but most of all, I was still in doubt if they were of literary nature. This worried me a lot. I was afraid of being run of the mill. I was helpless. After nights of thinking, I finally resolved on sending this text to that fairy, at any cost. And I had to wait months for that single opportunity. One night, when I was having a heart-to-heart conversation with a common Australian friend about our heartbreaks, suddenly W sat at our table after a series of fortunate coincidences. I do not remember how, but at the end of the night, her email address, jotted down on a scrap of paper, was in my hand. Next morning, I sent her my wistful story. I had to wait until the weekend when I would see her again. My heart would better not pound out of its place. I was anxious to know what those Lilliputian Cyranos had pulled. Would everything be all right or turn worse? That week seemed like eons to me. I ran into her in Jahangir on Friday. Like always, I got very nervous and felt like I would suffocate. In a catatonic language unknown to anyone, I asked her with profound difficulty if she had received my story. She probably did not understand me, but she smiled to me for the first time. And actually, with that deep, gloomy smile of hers, rich with 1,000 expressions. Just like that, I was the happiest man on earth. I wanted to kneel before her and cry into her embrace. Fortunately, she did not allow that. There were so many there that loved her presence. She took one good look at me, full of thoughtful and empathetic curiosity, and walked away like a shooting star. Alone but content, I stood there in the middle of the bar. I felt like buying everyone inside a drink, but turned round to see at least 40 people there. I gulped. I never had that much money. Was somebody watching us? The DJ grinned at me and started spinning one of my favorite My Dying Bride songs, The Light at the End of the World. The dawn was rising and the sky lighting up. This time, my tears were of joy, or maybe of dedication. There was hope inside me that everything was going to be better. It was as if I had been shown a revelation. The words spilling from my mouth were forming into a song of songs. I was not able to hear the track the DJ played anymore. My canticle, beyond any holy verses, was the world's most beautiful canticle now. All because I had made W smile. My canticle. Just a smile, a gift for all my sorrow, is all that I need, my God, to feel her. It was a revelation, I believe. The catatonia was broken, my tongue untangled, read canticles. Oh, my dear canticle, my canticle is of sorrow. Nobody knows the pains I have endured. Now, hope in my heart, my canticle on my lips, the holy verses were silenced. Poor W beamed a smile.